Harry Potter story from another's perspective. Rowan Barrows and the Forgotten Prophecy. Chapter 3. The Thistlebrook Thorns. Rowan Barrows woke on Saturday already grinning. It was the weekend, which meant two very important things. Firstly, the weekend meant Rowan would be seeing his father. He only saw his father on weekends now, but that made it feel bigger somehow, like everything happened faster when they were together. There wasn't time for awkward silences or long arguments. Chips on the way home, and the occasional trip into the wizarding world if his dad wasn't too busy. Secondly, there would be Quidditch. Not just any Quidditch, but the Thistlebrook Thorns. His team, his pitch, his broom, the roar of wind in his ears as he hurtled toward the hoops. Quidditch in Rowan eyes and the eyes of many others wasn't just a hobby, it was practically life. Every summer, witches and wizards aged 8 to 11 took part in the Youth Quidditch League, a scrappy, broom-splintering competition made up of village teams from across the region. Rowan played chaser for the Thistlebrook Thorns, a hard-working side better known for bruises than trophies, and though they had fought their way to a respectable mid-table finish, they were already out of the running for the cup. The final match of the season loomed that weekend. Thistlebrook versus the Wyvern Flyers, a polished, high-flying squad generously funded by certain very wealthy Wiltshire families who believed the right broom model was more important than talent. Still, Rowan felt the familiar fizz of determination in his stomach. They might not win the championship, but he was going to play the match of his life. The Thistlebrook Thorns' previous match had been against the Bramble Hollow Banshees, a scrappy little squad known mostly for flying like they were strapped to fireworks and screaming every time a bludger came near them, which, to be fair, happened often. The field that day had been muddy enough to swallow a boot hole, and Rowan had spent half the first quarter skidding across the sodden pitch like a startled duck before finding his rhythm. Still, once the rain eased, and the Banshees tired themselves out shrieking and dodging imaginary bludgers, the Thorns settled into proper play. Rowan scored twice, one neat shot through the bottom hoop, and one wild, one-handed throw that even he wasn't entirely sure hadn't been an accident. The Banshee's seeker never even got close to the snitch. She'd been too busy trying not to collide with her own keeper, who kept spinning in nervous circles. Thistlebrook had won 210-40, a rare glorious victory, so made even sweeter by Coach Pritchard muttering afterward, "Well, that was shockingly competent," which from her was practically poetry. Rowan had walked off the pitch soaked, filthy and grinning ear to ear, feeling like Quidditch greatness was just an arm's reach away. Rowan threw back the covers and leapt out of bed so fast that Candy, curled at the foot, fell off with an indignant hiss. "Sorry," Rowan said quickly, though he was still grinning as he pulled on jeans and a jumper. His Thistlebrook Thorns kit bag lay slumped in the corner, the team badge peeling at the edges. He dragged it onto the bed and shook the creases out before packing in his gear. First came the broom. It was an old clean sweep too, the name barely legible along the scratched handle. The bristles stuck out at odd angles no matter how many times he tried to straighten them. It wasn't the fastest broom in the world. In fact, it might have been one of the slowest. But it was his. And when the ground fell away beneath him and the wind tore past his ears, Rowan didn't care what anyone else thought. Next came his jersey. The Thistlebrook Thorns' colours were maroon with light blue shoulders and a thin blue stripe cutting across the chest in a sharp V-shape. Their stitched-on emblem, the Thistlebrook Thorns' crest, featured an extremely prickly-looking hedgehog wearing Quidditch goggles, perched on a broomstick like it owned the pitch. Behind it, thorn vines burst in every direction, wild and unapologetic. Rowan's own jersey had seen better days. The maroon had faded in the wash. The blue looked like a stormy sky rather than a bright one, and the number 6 on the back was peeling around the edges. But it was unmistakably a Thistlebrook Thorns kit, right down to the faint smell of grass and mud that no amount of scrubbing from his mother could get rid of. Last came his shin pads, his gloves, a size too big, borrowed from another player last season, and his scuffed practice robes for before the game. By the time Eleanor shuffled in, Rowan was practically bouncing on the spot. "You'll wear yourself out before you even get there," she said, lowering herself into the chair by his desk. "Not a chance," Rowan said, cramming the last of his socks into the bag. Eleanor smirked faintly, smoothing a crease from the maroon jersey with a hand that shook just a little. "Tell your father from me that if you come back with another rip in those robes, I'll be taking the cost out of his wages." Candy had leapt onto the bed by then, attacking the broom bristles. "Oi!" Rowan grabbed the broom before Candy could do any more damage. The cat swished his tail like he was plotting revenge. Downstairs, Mrs. Ashford was pacing the kitchen, muttering about train times. "You've got everything?" she asked as Rowan clattered in with his bag. Mrs. Ashford checked the clock, then the kit bag, then him. "All right, come on then, before your father turns up halfway through the match again." Rowan swung the kit bag over his shoulder, nearly smacking a vase off the hall table in the process. "Careful," his mother barked, snatching it out of harm's way. "Sorry," Rowan muttered, though he was grinning again as they stepped out into the cool morning air. The lane was quiet except for birdsong and the faint sound of voices somewhere over on Dawlish Road. Mrs. Ashford locked the door behind them, still muttering about train times and how Rowan's father always left things to the last minute. They passed Mr. Hollis sweeping his driveway. He lifted a hand in greeting, his eyebrows climbing at the sight of Rowan and Mrs. Ashford up so early. "Bit early for gardening, isn't it?" he called. "Off to see my dad," Rowan said automatically, though of course his mother said nothing. "Ah, football." Mr. Hollis nodded knowingly. Rowan didn't correct him. Rowan's mother had told all the neighbours that he played football over the weekends when he visited his father. They carried on down the lane, the station coming into view around the bend. A single stone platform, a leaning wooden shelter, and a timetable that looked like it hadn't been changed in years. "Right," Mrs. Ashford said as they reached the ticket booth. "Train there, your father at the other end, and straight to the pitch. Understood?" "Yes, Mum," Rowan said, handing over the coins for his ticket. The train clattered into the station with a hiss of brakes and the smell of oil. Rowan hugged his mother quickly, then scrambled aboard, trying not to hit anyone with his huge kit bag as he squeezed down the aisle. A few passengers gave the kit bag strange looks. One old woman peered at the broom bristles sticking out and said, "Spring cleaning, dear?" Yeah," Rowan said, ducking into an empty seat before she could ask anything else. The train groaned back into motion, rattling through the countryside. Fields and hedgerows blurred past the windows. Sheep barely looked up as the carriages clanked by. Rowan pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the train window, watching the fields pass in the morning light. His kit bag was wedged between his feet, broom handle sticking awkwardly into the aisle, but he didn't care. This was the weekend, his weekend, and in a few hours he'd be in Thistlebrook, one of the most curious places on any map. The train slowed at the tiny stop for Thistlebrook, little more than a cracked platform, a bench, and a sign so faded you had to squint to read it. And there, leaning against the fence by the entrance, was Mr. Barrows, Rowan's father. Tie crooked, sleeves rolled, hair wind-blown. He looked like he'd arrived only 5 minutes ago and probably had. But he was smiling as Rowan jumped off the train, kit bag thumping against his hip. "Ready for the big match?" his father asked, ruffling his son's hair. "Always," Rowan grinned. The lane from the station to the Quidditch pitch wound past a row of cottages, a bend in the river, and a field full of unimpressed cows who barely flicked an ear as Rowan and Mr. Barrows trudged by. Rowan swung his kit bag by the strap as they walked, scuffing his shoes along the dusty verge. "Mum nearly had a fit about the train times this morning," he said. "Like the train's going to vanish into thin air or something." His father gave a little chuckle, hands in his pockets. "She worries too much," Rowan added with a grin, "and nags even more." Whack! Mr. Barrows's hand landed lightly on the back of his head. Not hard, not angry, just enough to make Rowan stop mid-sentence. "Oi!" Rowan protested, rubbing the spot. "Your mum's a good woman," his father said, his voice mild but leaving no room for argument. "We don't talk about her like that," Rowan mumbled. "Was only joking." "Joke about the weather," his father said, eyes crinkling as he glanced down at him. "Leave your mother out of it." And just like that, the moment was over. Mr. Barrows pointed ahead where the tops of the goal hoops rose over the hedgerows. "Come on, looks like we're nearly late again." They walked on in silence for a bit after that, the dusty lane curving past hedges and the bend in the river. The air smelled of grass and cow manure, the sun flashing through the branches overhead. It was Rowan who finally broke the quiet. "How come no one else ever comes to watch?" he asked, nodding at the empty footpath ahead. "The trains stop here, don't they? You'd think someone would have noticed by now." His father smirked. "They have. But the moment a muggle sets foot within half a mile, they remember they left the oven on, or their shoes untied, or that they never liked walks in the country anyway." Rowan raised his eyebrows. "Little charm on the place," Mr. Barrows explained. "Keeps curious eyes away. They just don't want to be here anymore. Pitch could be in the middle of Piccadilly Circus and no one without magic would make it through the gates." Sure enough, the path dipped between two crooked willow trees, and there ahead was the Thistlebrook Quidditch pitch. To anyone without magic, it probably looked like an overgrown field with a few rusty sheds. But Rowan could see the tall gold wooden hoops in the sunlight, the stands rising from the grass, and the green expanse of turf stretching out before them. A handful of players were already warming up in their maroon and blue kit, brooms cutting lazy loops in the air. Rowan felt that familiar thrill in his chest. This was his pitch, his team, his game. The path opened out properly now, and the full Quidditch pitch came into view. The maroon and blue figures of the Thistlebrook Thorns were already scattered across the turf, some tossing the quaffle lazily back and forth, others mounting their brooms for a quick lap around the hoops. Rowan broke into a jog, kit bag bouncing against his side. 10 minutes till first whistle," his father called after him. "Don't fall off in front of the other dads." Rowan ignored him, grinning as he reached the edge of the pitch. "About time you showed up, Barrows," called a voice from the centre circle. It was Jack Cooper, the Thorns' best chaser. Jack was all elbows and knees, his maroon jersey hanging off him like it had been made for someone else. His broom looked as old as Rowan's, maybe older, but Jack sat on it like he was born to fly. "You ready?" Jack asked, tossing Rowan the quaffle. Rowan caught it one-handed, mounting his broom in the same motion. "Born ready!" They kicked off together, the wind rushing in Rowan's ears as the pitch dropped away beneath them. This was his favourite part, those first few seconds in the air before the game began, before anyone was keeping score. Just him, the broom, the sky, and the thunder of his heart. The Thorns swooped and dived through a few practice drills, Jack darting through the goal hoops with the quaffle while Rowan tried to block him. Down below, Mr. Barrows leaned against the fence, arms folded, watching the warm-up with that half-smile of his. It wasn't a fancy pitch. The stands were wooden and creaky, the goalpost needed painting, and the locker room roof leaked when it rained. But to Rowan, it might as well have been the World Cup stadium. The Thorns had just finished another round of passing drills when voices drifted over from the far side of the pitch. Through the gate came the visiting team, striding in with shiny new kit bags slung over their shoulders. Their jerseys were bright gold with black trim, each one crisp and spotless, with a bold Wyvern emblem stitched across the chest. The Wyvern Flyers, Rowan sighed. The Wyverns were the best-funded team in the whole district. New brooms, professional-level kit, a proper coach instead of someone's mum shouting from the sideline, and by the looks of things, a brand-new star player. A pale-haired boy strolled onto the pitch like he owned it, a broom in his hand so polished it gleamed even in the patchy sunlight. It wasn't just any broom either. Rowan could see the gold lettering from here. A Comet 260. Rowan nudged Jack as the pale-haired boy mounted the broom. "Who's that?" Jack shaded his eyes. "Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Just joined the Wyverns this season. Heard he's meant to be good." Rowan watched as Malfoy kicked off hard, the Comet 260 soaring skyward like it had rockets strapped to the tail. Malfoy leaned low over the handle, streaking down the length of the pitch before pulling up sharply and circling the goal hoops like a professional. "See?" Jack muttered. "That broom's doing half the work for him. I bet he couldn't catch a cold without it." Malfoy dove again, hair streaming, the Comet cutting through the air so smoothly it made Rowan's clean sweep look like a broomstick made for sweeping the floor. Rowan felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't bad. In fact, he knew he was good. But there was no way to compete with that. The referee, a retired witch with a whistle like a banshee's scream, strode out to the centre circle, levitating the quaffle beside her. "Standard rules," she barked. 10 points a goal, snitch ends the game. No blatching, blagging or broom tampering, and that means you, wyverns. Play fair or I'll hex you back to nappies." The whistle shrieked. The quaffle shot skyward, and so did half the players on the pitch. The wyverns scored first. 2 chasers slicing through the Thorns' defence like it wasn't even there. Passing so fast the quaffle was a blur before slamming through the left hoop. 10 points. Rowan barely had time to blink before the wyverns had it again. This time looping around the right flank before firing it through the centre hoop. 20. The wyverns' parents in the stands were cheering like they were at the World Cup. The next time the quaffle came Rowan's way, he gritted his teeth and went for it, ducking under a wyvern's chaser to steal it clean from under his arm. He tore down the pitch with Jack shouting for a pass, swerved past one defender then another, and fired it through the hoop. Wyverns 20, Thorns 10. The Thorns side of the stands went mad, but the wyverns were faster, sharper. Every time the Thorns scored, the wyverns answered twice over. 30-10, 40-10, 50-10. By now Rowan was drenched in sweat, his arms aching as he blocked another shot, then another, diving left to snatch the quaffle out of midair before it could sail clean through the hoop. "Nice one, Barrows," Jack shouted, darting past to take the pass. He looped once, twice, then sent it back, and Rowan scored again. 50-20. It didn't matter. The wyvern seeker wasn't even bothering to look for the snitch yet. They were too busy racking up points like it was a training drill. 60-20, 70-20, 80-20. Rowan nicked the quaffle again, tearing down the centre line with 2 defenders closing in. He faked left, swerved right, and slammed it through the centre hoop so hard it rattled the post. 80-30. By now, Rowan's arms and legs felt like lead. He blocked 2 more shots, scored once more himself, but the wyverns were relentless. 100-40, 110-40, 120-40, and then someone finally spotted the snitch. The tiny golden ball zipped near the south goalpost before vanishing toward the trees. Both seekers streaked after it, the wyverns on a comet, the Thorns on something so old it wheezed every time it turned. It wasn't even close. The wyvern seeker snatched the snitch clean out of the air, soared upward with a triumphant yell, and the whistle shrieked one last time. Final score, wyverns 280, Thorns 60. The wyverns whooped, circling the pitch in victory laps as the Thorns descended, sweat-soaked and aching but still grinning. "You were brilliant," Jack told Rowan, clapping him on the shoulder. "Without you, it would have been 500-0. But Rowan barely heard him, because across the field his father was talking to a man Rowan had never seen before. Tall, pale, dressed in black so sharply cut it looked like it might slice you if you got too close. Long blonde hair tied neatly back, a silver-handled cane resting lightly in one gloved hand. Rowan didn't need to ask who he was. One glance at the pale-haired boy leaving the wyvern's tent told him everything. Draco's father. Rowan started toward them, but even from here he could see the way his father kept his voice low, how his shoulders stiffened when the man gestured casually with that cane. Rowan was still too far away when Mr. Barrows broke off the conversation sharply. The man gave a thin smile, turned on his heel, and strode toward the gate with Draco trailing after him. "Who was that?" Rowan asked when he finally reached his dad. "Someone you don't need to talk to," his father said shortly. Then, after a moment, "or listen to." Understand? Rowan nodded, glancing once toward the gate where the man had disappeared. Something in his father's voice made him decide not to ask again. The late afternoon sun had slipped behind the hills by the time Rowan and his father had left the Quidditch pitch, the last of the Wyverns disappearing in a chorus of cheers and hoots from their supporters. The air was cooling fast, the smell of grass giving way to the faint aroma of vinegar and frying oil from the high street of Thristlebrook. They walked side by side down the lane, kit bags slung over shoulders, broom tucked under arm. Rowan was tired, muscles aching in that pleasant way after a hard game. As they reached the corner shop by the green, Rowan's father stopped abruptly. 2 bags, he told the man at the counter through the open hatch. Extra salt, splash of vinegar. Rowan's stomach growled loudly enough for both of them to hear. 5 minutes later they were heading home with paper-wrapped parcels steaming in their hands, the smell of hot chips filling the cool evening air. They ate as they walked, blowing on the chips to keep from burning their tongues. Rowan didn't realise how hungry he was until the first bite. Crisp edges, soft middle, salt and vinegar stinging his lips. "Played well today," his father said suddenly. Rowan looked up in surprise. His dad didn't hand out compliments like sweets. "Really?" "Held them off as best you could," Mr. Barrows said, tossing a chip to a passing crow. "Could see you working hard out there. Fast thinking, good dives. Wyverns have the best kit in the district, but you made them work for it." Rowan felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the hot chips. "Still lost, though," he muttered. "Losing's not the worst thing in the world," his father said simply. "Giving up is." He nudged Rowan's shoulder with his own, "And you didn't give up." They walked on in silence after that, the sun sliding lower behind the rooftops, the paper bags growing steadily lighter in their hands. By the time they turned up the gravel path toward Mr. Barrows' house, the first stars were beginning to blink into the darkening sky, the warm yellow glow of the windows waiting for them at the end of the lane. Mr. Barrows' house sat at the very edge of Thistlebrook, a squat red-bricked place with a crooked chimney and a garden gate that squealed in protest when Rowan pushed it open. Warm light spilled from the windows, cutting across the darkening garden like a welcome mat. The front door swung open before they even reached it. "Master Aldrich! Master Rowan!" Puck the house elf stood in the doorway, wringing his long fingers together in delight. His tea-towel tunic was spotless for once, though his ears stuck out at angles that suggested they'd never seen a brush in their life. "Puck has put extra blankets on the bed," he squeaked, "and lit the fire, and polished the His enormous eyes fell on the empty paper bags in their hands. "Puck was going to make stew," Puck said sadly. "Stew tomorrow," Mr. Barrows said, stepping past him into the hall. "Chips tonight." Rowan grinned at the little elf as he followed. "Sorry, Puck. It was Dad's idea." Puck sighed tragically, like a poet hearing bad news, then snapped his long fingers. The paper bags vanished before Rowan could blink. "Puck will make hot chocolate instead," the elf declared, hurrying toward the kitchen, muttering. From the corner of the room came a low, judgmental hoot. Sebastian, the family's owl, perched atop the coat rack like a feathery gargoyle, his amber eyes gleaming in the lamplight. He looked Rowan up and down as if inspecting him for signs of mischief, before swivelling his head in one disdainful movement and staring fixedly at the fire instead. "Evening, Sebastian," Rowan said, earning nothing more than a slow blink in reply. The house smelled faintly of wood smoke and polish. A fire crackled in the hearth. Above the mantel hung a slightly crooked picture of Rowan's grandmother Eleanor, looking far healthier than Rowan had seen her in years, a faint smile on her lips. Upstairs, Rowan dropped his kit bag by the bed and flopped down without even taking off his socks. His muscles ached pleasantly. His hair was still full of wind and grass, and for the first time since the game ended, he felt completely, bone-deep tired. Somewhere downstairs, Puck banged a pan. His father stoked the fire, and Sebastian gave another faintly disapproving hoot. Rowan smiled into the pillow. In the warm house at the edge of Little Thistlebrook, Rowan let his eyes close and drifted towards sleep. Rowan woke late the next morning to the smell of something burning. For one blissful second, he thought it was breakfast. Then a loud clang from the kitchen made him remember Puck, and he groaned into the pillow. By the time he padded downstairs, the little house was full of smoke and squeaking apologies. "Puck is trying his best," the house elf cried as Mr. Barrows flicked his wand at the stove with a sharp, annoyed motion. The fire vanished instantly. "You're trying your best to set the house on fire," Mr. Barrows said, dumping the blackened frying pan in the sink. Rowan grinned as he pulled on his jumper. "Morning?" "Morning, son," his father said, handing him a plate of toast. "Puck's banned from frying pans until further notice." Sebastian the owl hooted once from the top of the dresser, as though passing judgment on the entire household. After breakfast, with no Quidditch game to rush off to, his father suggested they walk into Thistlebrook. The village was always lively on Sundays. Wizards and witches in slightly too bright robes haggled with shopkeepers over goods and services. A few goblins from Gringotts eyeing up the village notice boards, while a broom polishing station on the corner offered lightning-fast shines, 5 sickles. Rowan loved it here. It was the only place in the world where he could see a man buying licorice snaps while chatting to someone with a completely ordinary pushchair, until the baby inside sneezed and set the blanket on fire. They stopped by the baker's for fresh bread, then the second-hand broom shop where Rowan always lingered in front of the display window. The shop owner tried to interest Mr. Barrows in a Comet 260, extolling its turning radius and top speed, but his father only raised an eyebrow. "Comet," he said flatly. "Last time I rode one, it spat me off over a fence in Wales." The shopkeeper shut his mouth with a snap. As they walked on, they passed the sweet shop. A sign outside read, "Sugar Quills, home of the original fizzing Whizbee." Mr. Barrows came out 5 minutes later with 2 paper bags. "Don't tell your mum," he said, tossing Rowan one. "She hates all magic," his father said simply, though there wasn't much bite in his voice. They sat on a bench overlooking the river that cut through the edge of the village, watching a group of children daring each other to jump in. A fisherman on the opposite bank reeled in what appeared to be a very irritated boot. "You'll like Hogwarts," his father said suddenly. Rowan turned. "You think so?" "I know so," his father replied, leaning back against the bench. "I was in Gryffindor, you know." Rowan blinked. "You were?" "Best house there is," Mr. Barrows said with a faint grin. "Though I suppose you might end up somewhere else. Ravenclaw, maybe. Or Hufflepuff." Rowan wrinkled his nose. "Hufflepuff? Don't look like that," his father said sharply. "Some of the best witches and wizards I knew were Hufflepuffs. Loyal, hard-working, stubborn as trolls." He paused. "You might suit it." Rowan chewed on a sugar quill thinking about that. His father was quiet for a while, watching the river flow under the old stone bridge. A pair of owls swept overhead in opposite directions, letters clamped in their talons heading toward the hills. "You'll meet all sorts at Hogwarts," he said finally. "Some will be your friends for life. Some—" he paused, searching for the right words. "Some you'll wish you never met at all." Rowan tilted his head. "Like that Malfoy boy." His father's mouth tightened just slightly. "Especially like the Malfoys. Old family, old money. Think they own half the world because they can afford the other half." He flicked a piece of sugar quill paper into the river and watched it float away. "They'll want to know your name, Rowan. Best thing you can do is keep your head down and your eyes open." Rowan frowned at the water. "What if they don't like me?" "Then you're probably doing something right," his father said dryly. For a moment, Rowan almost asked about the pale man at the Quidditch pitch yesterday, the one his father had spoken to with his voice so low and his shoulders so stiff. But something in his father's expression stopped him. "Was Hogwarts good?" Rowan asked instead. Mr. Barrows smiled faintly. "Best years of my life. Quidditch. Midnight feasts. Nearly got expelled twice." "Twice? Don't get ideas," his father said, giving him a look that Rowan decided not to argue with. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the river and the shouts of the children daring each other to fall in. You'll like it, his father said again, softer this time. Doesn't matter where you end up. Just make the most of it. Dad, he said. There's someone else going this year, Rowan said carefully. His father glanced sideways. There are usually a few hundred. Rowan huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, but this one's different. Aldrich knew before he said it. He always did. Harry Potter, Rowan said, unable to keep the awe out of his voice. Everyone knows him. People talk about him like he's, I don't know, like a legend. Aldrich's expression didn't harden exactly, but something in it settled, became more serious. They would, he said. Rowan leaned forward on the bench, elbows on his knees. Do you think he'll be in Gryffindor too? I mean, if he's brave enough to. Rowan, his father said gently, cutting in before the story could gather steam. He was a baby. Rowan blinked. I know, but people forget that part, Aldrich said. They like the story better. Rowan frowned. I just think it'd be amazing to meet him, to say I was there, same year and everything. Aldrich watched the river for a moment before answering. That boy's been through enough without people collecting stories about him, he said quietly. Every time someone looks at him and sees a legend instead of a person, it adds weight he didn't ask for. Rowan's excitement dimmed a notch, confusion creeping in. So, I shouldn't talk to him? Aldrich shook his head. No. Talk to him if you want. Sit next to him on the train. Ask him what sweets he likes. Complain about homework together. He looked down at Rowan then, eyes steady. Just don't pester him for the worst day of his life like it's entertainment. Rowan swallowed. He hadn't thought of it like that. Oh, he said quietly. After a beat he added, but it is still pretty cool though. Aldrich snorted despite himself. I'll allow you that. Rowan smiled again, softer this time, and watched the river slide past, the name Harry Potter still buzzing faintly in his head.